Okay.
Welcome to Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. What's food and beverage got to do with it? Let's welcome your host, Tracy Stuckrath.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everybody. Well, actually, before we go, does everybody know what F&B means? Because a lot of people I talk to that are outside of the meetings industry don't know what F&B means. Is everybody here a meeting planner or in the meetings industry? Because we talk our jargon, and actually like 2 weeks ago, one other person and I had a complete conversation with acronyms that if anybody was listening didn't have any idea what we were talking about.
Cindy says yes. Deidre says yes to both.
Okay, good.
Deidre says yes, so I think we're good.
Okay, so my first question, John, let's go to the next slide, please, is before I want to talk about what I said in the webinar or in the description of the webinar is like, what are we going to cover today? And then that is how DEI and food and beverage are connected. How to improve employee well-being or attendee well-being through food and beverage, and identify ways to create safe and inclusive dining experiences. Is everybody cool with that? And I talk really fast, and some people know that already about me, so I'm going to spewing through here, but I do love to have interaction and have conversations. So I've got the chat up here on my screen, so make sure that you're chatting in there, raise your hand, anything like that. You can stop me and ask questions. I am going to give you a lot of information in the next hour, 55 minutes. And so, but at the last part of that, before we end, I am going to show you how to get more information if this is not enough for what you want and if you need more. So please remind me to share with you that. But I will definitely do that. So let's get started. Okay, so what does diversity mean to you? Diversity, when we think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, that first word is diversity. And there are so many ways that we can be diverse. Like there's age, older and millennials and what are those? Baby boomers. There's individuals who have, Alicia said, all the ways in which we are different. That is true. If you're visually impaired, if you utilize a wheelchair, if you are a lesbian, or if you're gay, or you're whatever, your biracial marriage, men and women, there's all different ways to be diverse. And Nicole, multiple experiences, right? And you and I could be going to the same event and we have completely different experiences. That's how we're also diverse. So, and then when we jump to equity or equality, there's a difference between equality and equity. And if you look at this image here, sometimes you see it when people are looking over the fence to look into a baseball field or something here, there's the difference in equality, whereas on the left there, you can see how everybody's got the same bench, right? Same size stool, I should say, but it doesn't make them be able to reach the apples. But when you look at equity, everybody's got the stool that fits them the best, works for them. So they can all now have an equal playing field to reach those apples. I still think that little kid needs one a little bit higher, but we get the point. What is used to help equalize you? Yes, we want everybody to be able to have that same experience and participate in that event, whether it's at work, it's, a food festival or whatever. And then when we look at inclusion, what I really like, what definition of inclusion is, that it's intentional. And John, can you jump to that next slide for me, please? Inclusion, is where everybody feels like they have a place. Think about the kickball games and even I think it's the Charles Barkley ad, right? Getting picked for the basketball team. And he was like so excited that he got picked. But it's making sure that we're intentional with what we're doing in creating that inclusive experience. And it means that we need to look at the diversity and we need to look at the equity in how we're designing events, and or our workspaces. And yesterday I actually had to go get my car fixed. And the Mini Cooper dealership says it's under construction and they've got these new desks there. And when I look to the right, there's the walkway to go to the seating area. Somebody in a wheelchair or a walker couldn't get between that space. And I mentioned it to somebody and to my service advisor, and he's like, well, you don't tell me, tell my boss, because my boss doesn't listen to me. But it's looking at, how do we fix that? How can you make sure that everybody has that equal experience and feels included in even going to the mini car dealership? So then I want to talk about food. So the next question is, what is food? Put in the chat here, what is food? And Nicole, I just noticed embracing everyone's strengths and including everyone, celebrating it. Yes, 100%. So what is food? You've got a hamburger and some French fries. You've got, what looks like the healthier food on the left-hand side, the apples with the measuring tape, et cetera. But Deidre, a taste bud experience that gives your body energy. Yep. It's nourishment. It's fuel, family, togetherness, warmth. Yes. And right now around the holidays, it's celebrations with our family. And love. Yes. 100%. When somebody gets sick or somebody dies, what do? We bring food to them. It's our common ground. It's a universal experience. And looking at these images here, you can see there's so many different things that food does for us and brings to us. Yi Ming said something edible varies based on each person's experience and cultures, 100%. Hello, Yvette Barton, my friend from Atlanta. And actually, put in there, where do you live? I know Katiana's in DC and Yvette's in Atlanta. And Katiana, I just love the fact that you said memories, love, inclusive. And down in that bottom, the second to the left, that's my grandmother's 90th birthday, right under the R in experience. Those are different ways that we utilize food for a different kind of experience. And food is always there. And if you're a meeting planner, we always have food, right? And how do you make that experience work together with food and beverage? And that's where, when we talk about food diversity, there's a variety of different ways. And everybody, Nicole, food is also traditions passed down 100%, right? My mom was making these cookies the other day for Christmas, and they're the wedding cookies, the little ones that are balls and rolled in confectioner sugar. And we were looking at the recipe, and it was from, not passed down, but it was from a woman, our neighbor, when I was in second grade. So, which was a long time ago, right? So those are passed down, and my mom still has the recipe card that Elaine had written out for us. And so, but when we're talking about food diversity, there's so many different ways that we can think about it. And somebody mentioned culture. And I think John posted in, our family makes a turkey stuffing that is half American and half Chinese. All right, John, I need you to explain what that means. I didn't know there was Chinese stuffing. But that's something that we need to learn, right? There's stuffing in Chinese. I'm sure there is, right? But, looking at tacos, everybody loves tacos. People might be eating a specific way for their health reasons, because environmental reasons, climate change, they might have a food allergy. They have a religious-based practice that says, I can eat here. I can't eat this. I can't eat that. I need to not eat. I need to fast during the day. Food is a collection of history. I love that, Nicole. It's very true. And the picture on the bottom right there is like, where are people harvesting their food? I did not take that photo, but in Vietnam, I witnessed that same kind of experience of the people they lived on houseboats, right? And they were bringing the food from the mainland to their houseboats, or they were fishing in that water. How we collect that food, and we eat different ways. And if you threw that person in the middle of Times Square and said, go eat, what would they do? That experience is going to be mind-blowing, right? And thanks, Deanna Mitchell. How are you? Watching there on LinkedIn. I appreciate that. So when we're thinking about food and beverage, we have to think about the diversity in that and how we eat differently. And it is challenging, right? We cannot potentially accommodate everybody's different dietary restriction all the time. And because we would just have to say, everybody bring your own food. And sometimes that is an option, right? But when we're creating events in our workplace, how do we make sure that happens? And so John, let's go to that next slide for me, please. But before we get into that, I want to tell you a little bit about me and how I got here, right? So I'm an event planner. I have been an event planner since college, so 1990, and over 30 years. And I have worked corporate, association, the Olympics. I've done food festivals, but I'm also I have food allergies, and that's where I came to be and what I'm doing now. I got diagnosed with an allergy to yeast, and at the time I was planning 100 meetings in a year for a corporate company, internal, and I couldn't eat at my own events. And so in 2010, I decided to go out on my own and to start educating our industry on the meetings industry and the corporate world on how to feed me and the 32 million other people around the world that have food allergies. Actually, the 32 million is just here in the United States. So if you're welcoming people from all over the world, that number jumps to 250 million people have food allergies. So I'm a certified special events professional meeting manager. And once I decided to do this, I became a certified health coach and a certified food protection manager. So I understand the back end of it, as well as understanding what people's different challenges are. And I got on stage, and that's where I am today. And so I'm really excited to be able to bring this to you and help you share, because this actually made me think about food and beverage differently as an event planner. I couldn't eat at my own events. And so, and I actually remember my friend Ron, he sat down, he was sitting next to me at a banquet, and I got a different plate than him. And he's like, "What's that?" And I'm like, "I've got food allergies." And he's like, "I want that." And I'm like, I know. And to be honest with you, then that was about before I started my own business. I'm like, I didn't even think about it at that point. But then this picture here represents an event, many events, where I have not had anything to eat. And actually, when you're an attendee at an event, and take yourself out of being a meeting planner, right? What do you do? Who do you ask the question to? You ask the question of your server. And I asked, do you have anything that's gluten-free? No, we don't have anything gluten-free. And they're like, we have vegan and we have the regular. And I'm like, and that's what I ended up with. I mean, and actually about 20 minutes later, a different server ended up running down the convention center hall to go get me a meal that was actually gluten-free. And the organizers after the fact are like, well, you should have come and found us. We would have gotten something for you because we did have it. Well, as somebody is an attendee at an event, they don't know who those organizers are. They don't know who to go find. They know only the server. Right? That's who their representative is. So a lot of times they end up with no plate at all. Nicole said here, I used to have to go to another building to use a separate microwave to heat up my food that I brought from home. Completely understand that as well. And I actually have another story about that coming up as well. You can relate with this experience of not being served or being offered an alternative. Alicia, understand that too. And John, let's jump to the next slide here. I love this picture. Is this what you got, Alicia? Is a bowl of berries? Because that is the epitome of what individuals with dietary restrictions get, is a bowl of berries. Whether it's for breakfast, it's your dessert, it's your lunch, a fruit bowl. And a lot of times I have to actually ask what is in the fruit bowl, because it's cantaloupe or pineapple a lot of times, right? You can't get fresh bowls of berries all the time. You got hot tea once for Thanksgiving. Okay, that's not going to satiate you, right? And that's not going to make you feel included in that event, right? So how do we look at that differently? And we have to be really intentional with what we're doing. The worst I saw was a plate of steamed vegetables, no spice or presentation. And actually, John, our friend Jesse, was handed a plate of carrots that were sliced up. They were roasted and then just sliced up on the plate. That's what she got for her vegetarian meal. And everybody else has got, these wide variety of dishes. And which brings me to a story that I'm going to tell you this story of me first. I remember right after I got diagnosed, I'm at work and we're doing the birthday party, right? And everybody's having cake. I couldn't have the cake because I was gluten-free. I couldn't eat the sugar. And my boss's boss just looked at me and she's like, just eat the damn cake, Tracy. And I'm like, but I can't. And so everybody, and I'm okay sometimes with that, but sometimes I'm not. So how do you alleviate that? And ironically, years later, we were at a funeral for one of our former colleagues, and she's told me, she's like, my daughter's now vegetarian or vegan, and now I understand what you were going through a decade ago. But that was 2003 when I got diagnosed. So I'm still remembering that almost 20 years later, that conversation with us. Just yeah, John, bring their own food, because no one understood. She never mentioned to everyone. And that's the thing. And Nicole and I were having a conversation, before we got on, about her food allergy, and it's very personal. And we need to make sure, when we're creating events and we want to create that inclusive experience, we want to make sure that we're actually giving them the opportunity to share and making sure that they feel comfortable in sharing that information, right? Because it does become personal, and you do want to step back. And Deidre, you said it perfectly there: suffer in silence. And it doesn't seem like that. So when you're looking at events and you're looking at experiences with food and beverage, is there anybody not eating? But we need to ask those questions up front. All right, John, let's jump to the next slide. Okay, so this popcorn story, this is a story of one of my clients, and I was cleaning out the popcorn. We had, when you rent that popcorn machine and you have it in the employee cafeteria or in the lobby of your building, you're having a function, right? And all that popcorn smell happened, just like in the movie theater, right? All these people were coming down to have popcorn and really wanted to participate in this event. And one gentleman is like, do you have any without butter? And I'm like, oh my gosh, I do this for a living, and we forgot to get some without butter, because that machine, when you rent it, automatically comes with the butter included in the packet, butter and oil already included in the popcorn or in the packet. And so it's made that way. So the next time that we did it, we made sure that we had, bags of popcorn that were available that didn't have butter on it, for the people who were vegan and they were vegan and dairy free. And I mean, I literally slapped my forehead with my hand and like, oh my gosh, I did this. And so we have to be intentional when we're thinking about what we're doing. Nicole, okay, part of your story, but later. Okay, we'll talk about that. And then the next picture here is of the same company, same client event, and we were having coffee and donuts, right? And because of the popcorn machine, right, we wanted to make sure that it was, that we were inclusive. So look, right, we've got the Dunkin' Donuts mini donuts there, and we've got coffee and donuts, but we wanted to make sure that we had options for everybody. So in the next video, or in the next image, we changed that slide, and you can't really, I don't know if you can read it there, but in between those two donuts, we had vegan, gluten, dairy, nut, and soy-free options were available. And I was talking to one of the attendees, or one of the employees, who was vegan and vegan and nut free, I think. And he's like, you don't have that. I'm like, yeah, we do, I promise. I'm like, come on down. He's like, nope, I'm okay. Like, I promise you, we've got options. And we had individuals coming down there going, where did you buy this? Oh my gosh, where can I get some of this for myself at home? And it was just like this flurry of encouragement and fun. And we had so many more people coming down and participating in that game that day. And it really changed the environment, and it made them feel cared for, and it made them feel included in that. And John, correct, building trust, because they don't have trust in what you do. And Nicole, I like that you thought about it. You had intention with what you were designing with the food and beverage. Okay, and that's when we let's go to the next slide, John. Intention, right? It's like having this conversation saying, hey, you're welcome, right? We're participating with you. And this image here reminds me just of a business experience my friend David had. A friend of mine from high school, we all go our separate ways, and we're doing all these different things. And he came to visit me on a business trip, and we were talking about what we each do. And he does a lot of lunch and learns as an engineer and for his clients. And so he went back and he had just gotten a new client, and he heard that that gentleman was, a PIA, right? Not easy to work with. And he ended up, didn't know anything else except for that, and that he was his new client. But when he called the restaurant to get the takeout orders for this lunch and learn, he asked the restaurant, do you have any alternative menus? Do you have gluten-free? Do you have vegan options? And he sent those out to all of the attendees and said, please pick from which menu that you prefer. And that gentleman emailed him and said, thank you so much for doing that, because now I'm not eating, or I'm now not having just iceberg lettuce when everyone else is having a full meal. And that really changed his relationship with my friend David. David is now caring for his customer and showing intent in doing that and building a better business relationship because of just making that small change. Iceberg lettuce, and now it's on recall, I think, or there's a shortage of it. So hopefully we won't be seeing iceberg lettuce anytime soon. Okay, so next slide, John. And then there again with the intention, and Deidre, I think you've seen this image before, this walkway here. What is the intent of this party at the end of this walkway? What kind of intention do you have? Are there going to be different food options? There looks like there's a bunch of different country flags flying down there, so that maybe there's a really cool cultural event and different foods from different countries there. But think about your attendees that utilize walkers or wheelchairs. What is their experience at the end of that walkway, right? Any kind of experience you're designing, what is your intent at the end of it, right? Are you trying to build new business? Are you trying to entice your employees to sell more? Are you thanking your employees for doing more? What is your intent with that? And does your food and beverage and your event reflect that intention, right? Because when you're thinking about events, I always used to ask my bosses, what do you want them to know? What actions do you want them to take after the fact? And then how do you want to make them feel after having attended this event? So same thing here, and same thing with the food and beverage that you're serving, especially when it's the number one expenditure, right? So how are you doing that? And let me know, as John put in here, feel free to chat any type of experience that you've had when you're doing that. There's one friend, one of our friends who utilized the scooter. She was attending an event, an industry event. And I remember there was 3,000 meeting planners converging onto lunch, right? It doesn't matter if it's meeting planners or anybody, but 3,000 people converging into lunch. They hadn't opened the doors yet. And she was at the front of the door in her scooter, asking to get in early, because once you get into that big, huge ballroom, there's not a lot of room to maneuver, right? And they would not let her in early. And they said the doors open for everybody at the same time. And just think about that. Somebody in a scooter or a walker, or who's visually impaired at the front of that door trying to get in early so they can navigate. And they don't let them in. And then the 3,000, 4,000 people come rushing in behind them, and where do they go? What is that kind of experience? Yes, safety is huge, 100%, and that's food safety, that's accessibility safety, and this is about a conversation about accessibility. How do we make food and beverage more accessible? And I don't have this slide on here, but this is one of my thought processes on this. It's not just about what's on the plate. It's also, how do you access that plate? Can everybody attending that event access that plate? All right. And this image is a perfect example of that. And then the one that's going to follow up in that as well. But can they reach the food, right? Can they reach it because it's on a vertical buffet? Or can they reach it, via that walkway? How do you do that? This is me at an event I did in April, and I was I actually had the banquet captain take these photos of me so that he could see the experience that somebody in a wheelchair might have with how they were presenting the food and beverage. And it's not shown in this picture here, but they had designed the toaster to be in front of the bagels. So anybody, no matter what, had to reach over the toaster to get to the bagel and then put the bagel in the toaster. And that's a safety issue as well. And so thinking about, even the intention and the design of how you're designing these food and beverage events. And it's walking in the feet or walking in the shoes of others, right? Understanding that. Okay, next slide, John. So this is a story about a restaurant chain, and they were sued because for severe, pervasive, and dangerous harassment. One of the employees had a peanut allergy, and that gentleman had communicated that food allergy to his boss. Well, his boss became belligerent about it and became a bully about it, actually, and said, oh, we're going to put your peanut butter on your EpiPen, or here, try this cookie. It doesn't have any peanuts in it, right? And his boss was doing that. And so his coworkers started to do that. And that employee ended up quitting his job and going to work somewhere else, but ended up suing that food company. And they don't know what happened, but they settled out of court. So we know that, is probably a large lump sum, but and that's a little bit more of a bullying aspect, but I actually witnessed it at an event that I planned in Atlanta. I was one of the event planners, and we were sitting at our staff table in the back of the room, and a gentleman from the front of the room came and sat at our table. And we're like, what's wrong? He goes, the people at my table are like, oh, they were bullying him. Oh, here, try this, try this. This is a grown man at 55 years of age that was being bullied at his own his own company's awards banquet because he had a food allergy. And he came and sat back with the staff, and the people at his table even got up and came back and were like, come back and eat with us. We promise we won't do it again. That person's not going to go back and sit at that table. And what is his experience with the rest of his coworkers? And then the next story is about, I had students wave mammalian food in front of me to see if I would react. That's not fun, Nicole. That is not fun at all. And this is the lost productivity conversation here is Nicole and I were talking about this, and she actually has a reaction being in the room with mammalian meat. And this employee here was allergic to fish, and she couldn't even actually go into a Whole Foods when they were steaming, and she lived in Boston, so they were steaming seafood a lot. She was actually, I think, allergic to seafood. And she had gone to her employer and said, I'm allergic to seafood. Can you make sure that nobody's using the microwave on my floor? Can you make sure that nobody's got tuna fish in my floor, open can and eating that, because I will have an allergic reaction. She took it to HR. She took it to her boss. It took them about 3 years to put up posters. But in 1 year, she lost about 2.5 weeks of work because she had anaphylactic reactions in the workplace. And that did not even trigger with her employer. She actually ended up having to take it to the Massachusetts Department of Employment, Diversity, and Equity department, and they had to come back and talk to the employer. And it lasted a little bit. So Joan's on here. Thank you for watching via Facebook, Joan. Curious to know, once off the walkway, what was the surface like? Curious about the shade of those with lupus or other illnesses. 100%, Joan. It is like, do you have a wheelchair that had the beach wheelchair, right? Do you have that experience? Or is there walkway down there all the way at the end of that beach rail? 100% agree. We have to be intentional with our designs because we want to create that inclusive, universal experience across the board. Alicia, that's unfortunate. I'm so sorry that you've had that experience twice. I mean, it really does impact that. And, and in one of the books I co-authored, there was one girl, she's like, she brought her own food, and her bosses, she brought her own food because her boss is like, well, we're not going to feed you next time for your event, so just bring your own stuff. But she's not compensated for that, right? So why does she have to think about that? And John, the next story, I think it's the birthday cake one. This company is my friend's restaurant that this happened in. He was the chef at the time, and they did not communicate anybody having any kind of dietary needs at all. And And well, then they showed up and they said there was peanuts. Somebody had a peanut allergy, and they communicated it to him. And he actually grew up with a mom who was allergic to shellfish. So he was very attuned to food allergies and managing this. Well, he did let he did let the company bring in a cake from the outside. They bought it at Costco. And as we all know, food and beverage companies usually do not allow you to bring in outside food and beverage. He did waive it for this time. And that woman actually had an allergic reaction at the table, was taken to an ambulance, and ended up passing away because of that cake. He ended up having to pay out some of the insurance on that as well, because it was served in his restaurant by his staff, even though it was made off-site. Okay. And then the next story, I believe, I love this story, is it's from out of New York. Is it New York? And this is a friend of mine, Amelia, who is a general manager for a food service company in a corporate cafeteria. And she grew up with a sister who has multiple food allergies, so she's very attuned to this. And so when this new employee joined the company, she found out that he was Jewish, and that he had very strict practices in his Jewish dietary, in his Jewish practices. And so she sat down with him. And let me jump back one second a little bit, but she had taught all the chefs, we have to label it. She had already communicated to the company, I want to know all the allergens that people have in the company so that we can label for them. So she's already working with the company to ensure that allergens were labeled on everything that was served in the company cafeteria. She even went so far as to make sure that every chicken and beef was halal certified. So because it was a tech company, so she already had the ability to make sure that those people felt included in that. Of course, the only thing that wasn't halal was the pork. But this new employee who was Jewish, she sat down with him and they had a discussion on what his needs were and how she could accommodate them. And then she took it to the company. And because breakfast and lunch were free meals, this company provided for them, and she could not accommodate the strictness of what he needed in his kosher diet, the company actually subsidized his salary to pay for the breakfast and lunch that he would have to bring in from home. And I love that story because that company listened. Amelia listened to him. She went with solutions. And then this was the solution that worked best for all three of them, the diner, the employee, diner/employee, as well as the company. And that's a way, to really make sure that we're being inclusive in that experience. And then there is hope. There is a way to do it. Yes, John, there is. Thank you. I even have worse allergies to ants. Wow. Oh my gosh. Okay, so next slide there, John. This is an event. This is a story from an event I did a couple of years ago for Spin. And I was managing the food and beverage for that event. And this woman acknowledged, I think her name was Alicia, acknowledged or communicated that she had an apple allergy. And she could not be in the room with apples. And we were going to an event we were hosting the event at a Great Wolf Lodge. And so I reached out to the planners, the organizers of Spin, and said, okay, can we just make sure this whole event is apple free? And they said, of course. So I went to the chef, we're talking about it. I reached out to Alicia and just said, letting you know that we're going to make sure that the event has no apples in it. The only apples allowed were iPhones and watches and computers. And we made an announcement on the event app. We made an announcement in an email and saying we're being Apple aware. Please don't bring apples into the event space. And actually, to me, I actually had to think about my juices that I get from Whole Foods. Making sure that the juice that I picked from Whole Foods that I normally put in my refrigerators didn't have any apples in it, because I wanted to go to that next level. Well, her response to me was that you have no idea the blessing you have given me. Reading this brings me to tears. And I hate this allergy more than you can know. And she almost died. And she almost died from eating an apple eating a banana that was in a bowl apples were in the day before. And that's how severe her allergy is. But I love the end of this. I have no words that could show enough gratefulness. And to me, because she got to come to an event with 200 of her peers as a meeting planner to learn and network and not have to worry about any apples being in the event space. The chef and I sat down, we removed apple cider vinegar, we removed apples from everything that we could do. We were sitting there and he was having his staff take pictures of ingredients on sauces, and we were changing sauces the day before the event. Oh, John, I didn't know that about you. Thank you for sharing. I hate the isolation more than anything. And Nicole, that's really true. It's an isolating experience. And so there's ways to, combat this. And all right, John, let's go to that next, because to me, Nicole, you're going to be a lot more grateful if I did that for you, right? Or made sure that there was no mammalian meat, or how we're cooking it, or what we're doing. And it does come to doing how we're cooking it, which brings me to actually a story that was in the news a couple of years ago when Burger King announced that they were going to start serving the Impossible Burger. And one of the restaurants in Florida was getting sued by somebody who's vegan and saying my Impossible Burger is not vegan. And it's because they were grilling it on the same grill that they grilled all the other hamburgers. All that they needed to do in that food safety training was to put a piece of aluminum foil down, right? For not necessarily in your case, Nicole, but for that person who's vegan, putting that Impossible Burger down, cooking it on a piece of aluminum foil instead of on the actual grill, right? So that thinking through that entire process. All right, so this slide here, eating together. So tell me what eating together means to you. It's team building. It's good for employee well-being. Any other thoughts?
Deidre has a chat in there for you too, Tracy.
Oh, you do? A time to bond, and I'm going to drink some water while I'm talking to you, and time to eat instead of rushing through the process. 100%. How many times do we say, oh, I'm going to skip that, I'm just going to work at my desk, right? But it's really a good time. Would they also need to change what they use to turn the burger, not just putting the aluminum foil? Yes, 100%. Yep. They probably have to change the spatula to get it off the grill. You can't just wipe it on the towel and then use that, because that towel's probably got the burger juices on it, and wiping their hands, even probably their apron as well, especially if it's a food allergy. It's really changing how we do things. And shield the splatter. Yes, ma'am. Good point. That's a good thing. But I do love this quote that I found online, that eating together is more intimate than act of looking over an Excel spreadsheet together. Raise your hand if you agree with that, right? I'm like, looking over an Excel spreadsheet without pizza or without something else, is really tedious. So how do you create that intimacy at work through the food and beverage that you've got, that you're serving, right? And creating those environments. One of the women that I was chatting with a couple of years ago used to work at the Hotel Del. And Joan, this is kind of taking it back to that question of that walkway, right? She said, if you put that walkway out and you tell the person who utilizes the wheelchair, well, here's how you're going to get out to that beach party, right? Well, are you really calling their disability out even more by doing that and saying that here's your access to this space, right? Right. Versus saying, building that access so that everybody utilizes the same walkway, the same way to get out to that space. My friend, another one of my friends who was at an event in Washington, D.C., and she had to utilizes a wheelchair, and she had to go to the back of the house into the kitchen, wheel down the hallway, go down an elevator, wheel down another hallway, and go down to another elevator to get where the food and beverage was. That's not that same experience. It's, because she was trying to go eat with everyone else. And that's how I met her, because she was sitting by herself, because they had also not designed the room to accommodate anybody with a wheelchair. All of the tables had 10 chairs around them. And when she rolled around, she couldn't roll her chair up to a table. She asked them to remove a chair so she could. They removed all the chairs from a table and put a handicap sign on the table. And that to me is just, that experience right there is the same as any kind of other experience, whether if you've got a food allergy or a religious-based practice, how you eat. Yeah. I cried when one restaurant I could go to within 40-minute drive closed. Totally understand that. Another friend of mine, who's allergic to garlic, can't go to this one restaurant because they changed their recipe. It's really kind of sad. And there's a picture I have in a different slide, is like, it's from London, but it says, if you've got food allergies, don't come into our restaurant. Right. And what is that saying to you? All right, let's get to the next conversation piece, John. We've got 15 more minutes. 70% of employees have experienced inclusion in the workplace. Think about that gentleman. I talked about it, his awards banquet. How have you felt ostracized in the past? Nicole, you've just mentioned that a little bit as well. Is there another way? And what I think, it's more likely to douse individual sense of belonging in their organization. So, right now we've got what is that whole term, right? Everybody's quitting, right? But we're trying to bring people back. So how can you utilize this as an opportunity to bring people back and ensure that they feel a sense of belonging? And there's one planner who was doing events, for hiring, and it was none of the people with food allergies got their food at the last event. And she's like, what do I do? And I'm like, these employers need to start sharing, hey, this is how we create that inclusive experience with our food and beverage. All right, John, next one. Perceptions of inclusiveness means someone seems to care for me as a person. My opinions seem to count to them. And think about an incentive trip, right? You've worked your butt off to sell as many widgets as you possibly can, or to reach your budget, to not exceed your budget, but meet your budgetary goals, get the number of attendees at your events, etc. But then you go on this incentive trip and there's nothing for you to eat, right? Am I going to feel that sense of loyalty to my company anymore because of that? Probably not, right? I've worked my rear end off for you, and what am I going to do? And this is how you make me feel. Okay, next one. Company health and culture, 25% of employees eating healthier food have higher related job performance. This is an opportunity to create, increase performance, increase productivity, increase retention, and reduce turnover by providing for them in the company cafeteria, in events and meetings, at happy hours, etc. It really does help improve that cultural aspect of our companies. Next one. So and this is a question that we have to ask, and where is food? And John, go on to the next one. We really need to think about, not only where is food, I want you to name where food is, whether it's in your company and or at your events. Think about where is food, but we have to think about who's eating, how we're feeding them, what we're feeding them, and where we're feeding them. And that's all about accessibility. Thinking about where is that food and those food and beverage experiences. Who are we going to feed? And does that include your staff? Does that include your vendors? Does it include your sponsors? What about your VIPs? If they have a separate area to eat for a different meal, what are you doing for them? Do you have excursions that you're taking people on? Where is food and beverage, and how are you going to feed them? Making sure that everybody has access to that. This picture replicates a story that I found on Twitter a couple of years ago from gluten-free glitter, GF and Glittery, and gluten-free and glittery. She was on an international trip, and she had gone to this restaurant, and this server, she'd explained to the server that she was gluten-free, what that meant. The server took care of her, but the next day she came in, and one of the server's coworkers was handing her some toast and some regular non-gluten-free toast. And so this waitress was running across the hall of the restaurant going, no, this girl's allergic to gluten. She can't have it, please. And the gluten-free and glittery was so impressed by that employee that employee learned about her and showed she cared for her. And that's what we need to do, the same thing in our employees, with our company events, with our conventions, et cetera. The translation, she really went out and cared for her, and she was super lucky by doing that, because she could have actually had a really bad reaction from that. And so, all right, let's see, do we have any chats in here? Oh, Inga, thank you for sharing my LinkedIn stream. I appreciate that. So anybody have an experience like this that they've done, or they've personally experienced, that somebody really cared for them and brought them something to eat? When something wasn't provided for them. Deidre said, I noticed that when people bring in food to share, it's almost always something sweet. I wonder how many people think about healthy, or is it gluten-free? 100%. And gluten-free is 100% in mostly pastries, except, baked goods, but it's also hidden in a lot of other things that you probably wouldn't know of. Twizzlers, for example, number one ingredient in Twizzlers is wheat, and again, all these sweet things that we're getting, especially right now. But this brings us to the need of being aware, right? And what we can do. And I've talked about all these different experiences and how we do this, but we also need to make sure that there's a lot of things that go into this. And as event planners, you've got all of these things that you have to take care of, transportation, flights and hotel rooms, and, food and beverages on that is probably on the top of that list, is audio visual, but we need to make sure that we're aware on how we're creating these inclusive experiences. And, okay, that next slide, John. We need to learn how to change. I like changing our fork. Can you change your fork to meet the needs of someone else? Try to eat as someone else. Go and look at your pantry. See what you can eat that is gluten-free, or that is vegan, or doesn't have any mammal meat in it. And, and how can you do that? And when I told you at the very beginning that I had a new way, I had a way for you to help you if you need more on how to do this. And that's where we're coming to this, is how to change your fork, what you need to do. And starting on January 9th, I have got, I'm launching again, the course called Every Meal Matters. And this course really goes in depth, a lot more deeply, on how to do this. We've talked about the conceptual here, concepts here of how, why we need to do it. How does it actually improve the experiences of your attendees? But I really want to help you really fine tune it and take the steps necessary to do that. It's a one-of-a-kind online training. It's 8 weeks long. Teaches you how to boost your bottom line, how to increase retention and reduce turnover, and how to create loyal employees, clients, and guests. We go into depth on how we do that, and how to meet and exceed financial goals, tools and techniques to create safer and inclusive food and beverage experiences. It's online, but we also do every single week. I also do live Q&A so that we can actually talk about what you're going through at the time, what you're trying to figure out in your own event planning on what to do that. And I also actually have special guests that come in. I've got chefs and food and beverage advocates, but the modules that we talk about in there are what opportunities and obligations that we have, as an employer, as an event planner, as a food and beverage catering company, your needs and requests. What are they? What's gluten-free? What's dairy-free? What's vegan and kosher and halal? What do all of those mean? How do you communicate with everybody? There's a lot of different communication channels, and how do you strategically plan for this? Because it does take a lot more steps to do this, but I want to make it easier. And once we put those procedures in place, it becomes very simple. And that's what we work on in Every Meal Matters. If I sold this outright, it would be almost a $3,000 webinar, or not webinar, but online course for you. It's 8 training modules. You have lifetime access to all of the tools that are in there. You get CEU credits if you're looking for those, and you get an entire how-to library on what to do if you need it. and that you can reference back to. And as I mentioned, one of the bonuses is that we do have guest speakers. This is a gentleman who is a food and beverage director. We've got the 8 weeks of live Q&A sessions. We've got a private Facebook group. So it would just be the people in this course, in this winter conference or course, how do you say that, cohort, that will be taking it in that private Facebook group. And we've got the individual hour-long conversations with experts. And I've had doctors and lawyers and food and beverage directors on the show talking about their role and how to make the food and beverage experiences more inclusive. So if you want to sign up, I'm actually giving it's $997 for the whole 8 weeks and lifetime access. My friend Tahira told me, she's like, I know quite a bit about planning inclusive events, and she still learned a lot. So I really appreciate her saying that about the course. It's a lot of fun. It's learning from each other as well, because we can learn from Nicole, we can learn from Deidre and Yvette. But it's an opportunity to really invest in yourself, your career, and your employees and your attendees of your events. So, and there's the link to register. The course is, the cart will be open for the next 2 weeks. So I will close it just before Christmas, and then we start on January 9th. And that will be that first week, and you get to access to the Facebook group, and you get the downloads, and you can actually take a quiz and see how much you know before you get started in the whole thing. And I will actually also send you this 11 tips to manage dietary needs. So as an added bonus, does anybody have questions? Public schools need help. Yes, so much. Yes, they do. Does anybody have questions about what I've covered, about the course? I'm here to answer.
And feel free to unmute,
yeah,
or you can chat your questions for Tracy.
Yeah.
Nicole, do you have any comments or questions for Tracy? I'm glad that you're here.
Thanks for letting me join, John. No, this is just great. I can just see where this course would just be so beneficial for so many in the corporate world, and also like in the industry, like restaurant and that sort of thing industry, just in general.
Yeah.
It would just open up so many eyes, it would just be amazing.
Yeah. And it really is about, well, and right now with staffing rise, right, it's really imperative to learn how to feed people, correctly and safely, and not dismiss them, right? And because there's one statistic that I know of that, a food allergic person's bill, and yours is a little bit different because you don't really eat in restaurants, but a food allergic person's bill is 38% less than a non-food allergic person's bill. And to think if they could make the changes, right, to bring that back, increase their sales by just bringing more people in and bringing more people into your event. And think about, if we have company cafeterias going forward, right, can that company cafeteria even make more money by doing that?
Right. Eventually, one day, hopefully I can get back into the world and eat again, but
Yes, understand.
Yeah.
Anybody else have any other questions? What are some good ways to socialize this topic throughout the organization? I'm thinking about the majority who might think it's an inconvenience to them. Oh my gosh, so much, Alicia. We can do lunch and learns. I like that idea of doing that. It's bringing it in, lunch and learns with an expert to talk about different dietary restrictions, or even having somebody that you work with do that. It's bringing it to your diversity, equity, and inclusion person in the HR department, and showing them how it's not just about, hey, we've got pizza, right? We're having a pizza party and we're doing this. And actually a story that I know is that some company during COVID sent cheese pizza to every one of their employees, 400 employees across the country. And my first thought was like, can that cheese actually be allowed in that house? The safety things that that's what jumped to my mind first, right? What if Alicia's allergic to cheese, or her kid is allergic to cheese? What does that happen? How do you manage that? And so it really is getting the HR department, as well as, the diversity, equity, inclusion team, to understand where this is. And that's doing lunch and learns and education for them. Share the link with them, because this is for them as well.
Thank you, Tracy. This is John online on your stream. You've got a question about what are the best practices for food signage or the labeling? I know that you saw a lot of places that have cards. Do you have some great guidelines on what planners should be thinking about when they present food?
Great question, and it varies differently. And one thing that I have learned is that the majority of the time at a hotel, the food and beverage is being labeled by the front of house staff, so the banquet team and the servers. It's not being designed by the back of the house. So it is really having that conversation up front with them on how to do that. I recommend putting in what the food contains, if it has an allergen, at least the top 9 allergens in it, and then also saying if it's vegan and vegetarian and gluten-free. So it really is kind of thinking that through, but I would definitely make sure that, servers have the information with them, and that it's clear labeling on that. And for visually impaired individuals, well, and in general, in no less than 18-point font, so that it's big enough for people to see, because you can't walk through a cocktail reception and not be, and you're scrolling down to read the label on the buffet, making sure that. Okay, Nicole. All right, thank you, ma'am, for the flyer. The Alpha Gal flyer. Appreciate that. Well, everybody, I appreciate you being here. Thank you very much. If you've got questions, feel free. I'm going to put my message in, or a chat in here. If you want more information, you can also reach me at hello@thrivemeetings.com. And if you've got questions about the chat or about this, or my services, just let me know. I appreciate it. Thanks.